everybody, welcome to our EtonHouse parenting webinar. We're excited to share with you today a session all about fostering literacy, numeracy and sustainability in everyday environments. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce loose parts to you. We're going to talk about where you can find them, how you can use them and how you can present them to your children at home. As well, we'll build connections to literacy and numeracy experiences that you can try out and experiment with your child at home. So moving on. My name is Jessica Deeprose and I am a pedagogy consultant for Reach. Reach, for those of you who don't know, is Reggio Emilia in Asia for children. And we are the network for Reggio-inspired preschools in Southeast Asia. I've been teaching for about 10 years now, and I moved to Singapore in, oh my goodness, I think 2016. So I was working at EtonHouse Claymore for the last 7 years, working with pre-nursery children and K2 age children. All the way from pre-nursery to K2 age. And then recently in August, I've moved over to HQ, so I'm working full-time for Reach, developing training for teachers and educators in our EtonHouse schools and external schools as well. We're also busy working together to set up some citizen ateliers for you to bring along your children and to interact with the different atelier that we have set up here at HQ.
Hi, my name is Ainhoa De Sola. I'm an Atelierista at EtonHouse, Claymore as well. But I've been working for almost 10 years in education in different countries, such as like Spain, England, and now Singapore. Always working in early years education, and as well I'm a mom of two very young children, a baby and a young toddler. So together we will be talking about different loose spots. Moving on. So when we're talking about loose bars, we're talking about materials that are open-ended materials. So that means that they don't have one specific way of use. They can be moved, they can be combined, designed. What I always relate to these as they have multiple different ways of being used. We are surrounded by them. It's just sometimes we don't see them in that sense, and we tend to throw them, but actually they're a treasure and they have lots of possibilities. So with this session we invite you to refresh your eyes and look at the materials with a different perspective, in a different way, because these materials have a lot of potential. They definitely encourage creativity, problem solving and independent thinking alongside other learnings. So when we're talking about loose bars could be natural or it could be man-made. When we talk about natural, it could be things like leaves, sticks, like seeds, anything that you see around. So sometimes it could be like a fun thing to do together, where you go to the park near your house and you go for a hunt, and you start collecting lots of different materials. You can use them in the park, or you can actually bring them home. It depends on what you want. At the same time, you have the man-made materials. There are materials that are surrounded in our house, like you can find them anywhere. Things like lids, bottle caps, cork, those kind of materials. We all have them in our houses, but we just don't see them on that way. So you can start collecting with them, and even if you want to make it fun, you can do one day where you bring all those materials into the bathtub and do like a cleaning session together and play with the water, and you will see how interested are the children on knowing more about those materials. moving on. So we've selected some materials for you. These are materials that you can find them easily anywhere in any house. Things like contact lenses, bottle corks, orange juice lids, yogurt lids. We all know, like, if you have young children at home, they are obsessed with these yogurts, liquid yogurts, and those lids have lots of possibilities because of the shape that they already come from. You have like soft drinks and water bottle lids. So these are all materials that are easily accessible. You have other materials that, such as like the cork, that could be transformed and modified. So in this case, we cut the cork to give a different height to it. You have the coffee capsules. Nowadays, everybody has drinks coffee from these beautiful capsules. All of them has different colors, patterns, texture. So that could bring a lot of elements for your learning. You have lollipops that they have different shapes. So all these materials, you can always find them on different ways and different shapes.
Every family is totally different and totally unique. So I think the materials and the recycled materials that will be coming through your individual houses will be very different depending on your food shopping, your lifestyles, your interests. So I'm sure there's many more options and opportunities for you to collect a wide variety.
In this case, we just wanted to like collect a very small amount of materials to see all the potential that such a small selection could have. So when we're talking about loose parts, of course, we need to think about how are we going to keep them, right? So we're looking at containers, what kind of containers we can use for collecting these materials. So these are just a wide option that we just found easily. There is like blueberry pots, cardboard cup holders, metal bowls, glass jars, all crockery. Not everybody feels comfortable having glass surrounding their children, so there's other options that don't break and they don't have that danger, let's say. So these are different options. So we've talked about loose parts. What are loose parts? Where can we find them? How can we keep them? But now it's as well about how are we presenting them to the children, right? We all like in our houses, you always have a lot of toys and there's always like busy areas, but the furniture that we use in, I think, is the key for all of this. So we'll suggest to use flexible furniture. When we talk about flexible furniture, we talk about a simple shelf that has different holes, so you can select each hole for a different concept. So you can have maybe one little one that it could be for loose parts, whether the other one is for the cards or for any other of the toys that the children are interested on. Other type of flexible furniture will be having like coffee tables, just like a simple board that is movable, a trolley on wheels that can be moved into different spaces, a carpet on the floor. All of these are they don't take that much space, they are flexible, they can transform constantly. And that's what we mean when we're talking about flexible furniture. Then the way that we present the materials is something to have in mind and to keep an eye. We're looking at it needs to be functional, but at the same time it needs to be aesthetic. So it needs to cover the purpose of like collecting the materials and keep them on a specific place, but at the same time they need to be presented in a way that the children will be curious to explore them. If they are all together in the same like basket, maybe or mix, then you might not see the potential of the materials. Whether if you classify them by color, by shape, by texture, the children will already feel connected to go and explore with them.
And it opens up the possibilities, doesn't it? Because if the children can see the size of the materials or the shades of the materials, it makes it easier for them to select and to reimagine these discarded materials. So yes, presentation is quite important.
And sometimes less is more. It's better to have less amount of material than having a super wide variety of materials, but they are all piled up together. So I recommend, and that this is what I do myself at home, where I rotate a lot of materials. So whether it's the toys and whether it's like open-ended materials such as these, I will have like maybe a container where I store them all together mixed, but later when I present it to my kids at home, I will just do a specific selection based on their interest or what I'm like want to connect with it, and then I will just rotate. Moving on.
Okay, so this is a poem called Just Playing, and we wanted to share it with you today, so I'm going to read it out. It's a poem by Anita Wadley. When I'm building in the block room, please don't say I'm just playing, for you see, I'm learning as I play about balance and shapes. Who knows, I may be an architect someday. When I'm getting all dressed up, setting the table, caring for the babies, don't get the idea that I'm just playing, for you see, I'm learning as I play. I may be a mother or a father someday. When you see me sitting in a chair, reading to an imaginary audience, please don't laugh and think, I'm just playing. For you see, I'm learning as I play. I may be a teacher someday. When you see me combing the bushes for bugs or packing my pockets with choice things I find, don't pass it off as just play. For you see, I'm learning as I play. I may be a scientist someday. When you see me engrossed in a puzzle or some plaything at my school, please don't feel the time is wasted, for you see, I'm learning as I play. I'm learning to solve problems and to concentrate. I may be in business someday. Today, I am a child and my work is play. So the reason we chose to share this with you is because learning doesn't just begin and end as soon as we enter the school gates or we arrive at the classroom door. Learning can happen at any time, any place, anywhere. So when you're thinking about interacting with your child at home and offering learning experiences, it doesn't need to be a sit-down lesson where you're sat for a period of time. Often children have had very busy days at school, and when they come home, they just want to have that free exploration, their free time. So we want to encourage you as parents to think about and look out for what is the learning that's taking place in their play, as it will help you to appreciate what they're doing a little bit more in their home life when they're having that free time. Moving on. So, firstly, I just want to mention about numeracy. We're going to talk more about numeracy and literacy now, but if we can just think about questions for a moment. So one of the ways in which you can support your child when you're at home is thinking about the kinds of questions that you're asking. So when we talk about open-ended questions, these are questions that don't require a yes or a no answer. What they do is they encourage your child to think for themselves, and often, particularly with some of these numeracy questions, they'll encourage the child to go and do something, to go and figure out the answer for themselves. Okay, moving on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little look at some of the materials that Ainhoa had talked about previously and kind of highlight the learning and the connections to literacy and numeracy. I just want to preface this before we go on. We're just stating that obviously every child is on their own individual learning journey, and depending on the age of your child, some of these experiences might be too advanced, they might be so far gone past some of these concepts. So just take in mind what you can, depending on your individual child. If you have any questions about specific literacy and numeracy kind of developmental goals for your child, I think it's best that you connect with the teachers at school, because obviously we are not working with your children and we haven't met you or them before. Okay, so, oops, sorry, moving backwards. So colour sorting and matching. This is an opportunity for children to identify different colours. If you're in pre-nursery, you're still developing your language, you're still developing your understanding of different colours. Children can explore primary colours, they can look at different shades, different tones. We have organising objects by size, so looking from small to medium to large. With loose parts, they're not materials that are designed for these experiences, so they can throw up different questions. For example, here you have a very large lid, and then we have some much smaller ones. They're not that different in size, so it's a bit of a challenge. We have stacking and building. Again, children love to stack and build different objects and items, and through this you might start to see different patterns. Perhaps they group all of the green lids together and all of the red and all of the blue, and that's an opportunity for parents to see, actually my child has a good understanding of the different colours and the different tones and the different shades. Another concept is patterns. This is one that can grow with your children as their knowledge and understanding develops. So very simple patterns for maybe much younger children. As you can see here, we've just flipped the lids over. One is completely orange and one has a white dot in the middle. You could introduce different loose parts to make the patterns more complex for much older children. We've got identification of numbers, so building numbers and being able to identify them. Of course, if your child is not quite there yet, you could build the number for them and see if they're able to identify it. We've got the cut and larger corks here. So one-to-one correspondence, understanding that the written number represents a certain quantity and exploring that with children. You don't have to use all of the same materials. Perhaps if you have a large variety of natural and recycled materials, they can choose their favorites. So coming on to different numeracy concepts now. So the idea of shapes. So finding different shapes in the household. We've got a small selection for you here. I'm sure there's many more that you could find at home. Looking at regular shapes, also looking at more irregular shapes, and also having the opportunity to build and form and create their own shapes.
So as we mentioned before, as you see on all these slides of the possibilities of the loose parts have lots of different ways to be used, and they will grow as your child develops their learning as well, their skills. So you don't need to be like changing the loose parts constantly because you feel like your child already passed that one, like his learning has evolved. It's more of like the complexity of what we're asking for, like what the possibilities that you can offer.
So I wanted to touch on everyday tools. This is a tool that perhaps some of you may feel is not so safe for young children. However, I think that's kind of a peak point where children are very, very intrigued by things that perhaps they're not using in their everyday lives, but maybe mum and dad are at home. And so what we like to do is to encourage you to support your child to learn how to use these kinds of tools and things safely. So rather than taking away that learning opportunity, we can encourage them to build their knowledge and understanding. Of course, for maybe a nursery 1 age child, so 2 or 3, you would need to be there constantly supporting them, making sure they don't trap their fingers. However, for older children, if you've been scaffolding them with these tools from a younger age, then they'll feel more confident and capable to then go and use those kinds of tools more independently at home. You'll feel more confident that you know that they know how to use it. I think a measuring tape is a really fun and enjoyable tool that you can easily find. You might have one at home. You could go to Daiso. You could even scaffold by having the material rulers, the fabric measuring tapes. Sorry. And then, you know, encouraging your child to identify the different numbers, to explore units of measurement, but also maybe to go on a hunt around your house and start measuring different areas. You could bring in literacy. They could be writing down the numbers that they can see on the tape or the numbers that they've measured. Exploring height and measurement is quite complex, but actually you can start doing that from a much younger age, and then that builds on their love and their interest and intrigue for these more academic concepts.
And they love when they lie down on the floor and then you measure them, you draw their outline so they can see actually their shape of their body. So these are like fun things to do at home or even in the street.
Yeah, and measuring their mum and dad too, because I guess sometimes it's one way and we're always measuring the children, but offering those opportunities. If you're laid down on the floor, then they can measure you as well. Moving on. So literacy, we'll come back to this again. So just encouraging those open-ended questions, encouraging children to think for themselves, to be going and finding out and figuring out answers through their exploration at home. So I'm sure we all have one of these in the household, whether you have an old keyboard that is no longer working or you've lost a key, or even just unplugging the keyboard that you have for your computer at home. Again, this is one of those everyday tools that often children are not encouraged to use at home, but even just exploring the different sounds and the different kind of cause and effect of pressing the keys up and down. Then you can start to build connections to literacy. So kind of I Spy, can you find letter A? Can you find letter B? The children will be quite excited to search through all the letters on the keyboard to see if they can find them. As well, if you have games at home, sometimes simple games like Scrabble or memory games. These are just some Scrabble tiles that I had at home. So you can start to work with your child on identifying the letters, but also matching them, grouping them. You could sing the ABC song together. Can they correspond the right letters to the right part of the song? Can they put the letters into chronological order? So just very simple experiences that are not so structured, but children really enjoy participating and also showing their skills to you, their parents. Of course, at school, there'll be lots of literacy and lots of numeracy and academics, but often children are very proud of their knowledge and what they know. So having the opportunity to share that with mum and dad at home. So coming back to the loose parts, some of the loose parts that I know I had shared in the beginning. So forming capital letters and lowercase letters. Often capital letters are much easier to build, particularly with much straighter items. Lowercase letters are a little bit trickier because they have lots of curls and swirls. So using different loose parts depending on the kind of letter you're trying to build. This is also an opportunity for them to understand how they would form those letters when they're writing them, and to maybe see letters in terms of shapes. We had a question that had come in about engaging interests. Now, as we know, all children have very, very strong interests. I know a son is very intrigued by cars and transport. So we wanted to encourage you to connect to those interests. Perhaps your child is not keen on sitting down and building letters with loose parts, and that's okay. You don't want to be forcing those things at home because you want to be encouraging them to enjoy these experiences. So maybe bring in their favorite car or their favorite dinosaur or a princess along, and you can form the letters in the air. You could form the letters on the table. If you have many cars, maybe you're building the letters with the cars. So just finding different ways to follow their interests and spark their curiosity. Okay, some other options that we have here, a letter or sound hunt. Now, this is something that you can do in any household. Also when you're on the move, if you're in the car or on the train. If you're at home, you could ask your child to go and find objects from around the house and see if they can identify the letter sound. So if they've collected a book, what sound does that word begin with? So book. Okay, great. Do we know what letter is connected to this sound? So B is for book, book. Just very, very simple experiences, but it shows you their knowledge and their understanding. You could challenge them by asking them to go and find something beginning with the letter G, and see if they can find something around the house. To extend on this, you could ask children if they might like to start exploring how to write or form those letters. For much older children, perhaps they might be able to write the name of the objects that they found around the house, and explore kind of both sides. So the sounds, the letter identification, and also forming and writing those letters.
And adding to that, on the photo, we see the whiteboards. Whiteboards are always a very useful thing to have at home because they have, again, multiple purposes. Sometimes it's for drawing, but sometimes you can use it as a combination with the loose parts, with a combination of the games Miss Jessica is just sharing. Like, you can quickly add things and delete on a very basic way. Sometimes even I bring one on my back when I'm traveling with my toddler to school, so then we can have conversations, we can write, we can draw on it. So it's a very handy element to have.
It's also very sustainable.
Yeah.
Being an educator in a classroom for many, many years, we know that children love to use paper, and perhaps we do one shape or one mark on a piece of paper and we're done, we're moving on to the next. That can be quite costly and also not very environmentally friendly. So having the whiteboard, children love to kind of erase their marks. If they're very keen on keeping the letters, then you could take a photograph on your phone. So then the whiteboard can be used again. So just some ideas for you there. Okay, so lastly, if we're looking at environmental text, so thinking about things that you can recycle in the home environment to again promote literacy. So we've got a selection of magazines here, we've got a takeaway order, we've got maps, even newspapers. So encouraging your child to look through these. I think the one on the front, you can see the numbers and the letters very clearly. So encouraging your child to either highlight those or just point them out to you. If you want to explore other skills that could be supportive to them in their development, you could explore cutting out. Maybe if you have younger children, it might be easier to cut out much bigger letters and numbers. Older children, they could be working on much finer cutting skills. Newspapers are wonderful in terms of high frequency words. So for those of you who might not be familiar with this term, a high frequency word is a word that can appear in any kind of text. So whether you're reading a magazine about fashion or whether you're reading a child's book about the ocean, these are words that will appear in both of those. So for example, just in the clip we have here, you can see is, you, that, just, have. These are words that children learn to read by sight. So this really supports them with their reading skills. It enables them to sight read those words. So then they have to decode much less words in longer texts. So yes, just collecting those magazines and things at home as well. If you're on the move and you're, I don't know, waiting at the train station and you've got one in your bag, then you can just pull it out. It's something that's easily able to be done on the move as well.
So after all of these, we want to touch base as well with imagination. Imagination is everywhere, and children are amazing with it. They're real. the way that they see things is between real and imagination all the time, right? So these are different ways that you can encourage as well your imagination and combine it with a love for numeracy and literacy. So, for example, you can continue working on the idea of the body and put a photo of themselves that they can extend using loose parts. They can bring measurements to it. We can bring words to that. Like, there's lots of possibilities that can come together. It's not separate. We don't always need to like box it everything like we do in numeracy, we do in literacy. Everything can be combined together, and these are some ideas to have like boxes. For example, cardboard boxes are amazing. They have lots of different possibilities. It can become a boat, it can become a house, it can become a car. Like, anything could be possible. They can go in, they can go out, they can color it outside, they can add letters, they can measure it, they can bring lots of different elements to it. The same tortoise is a great thing to have as well at home, where you can read the stories, you can draw with light, it doesn't damage the walls. You don't need to clean after, and they love it. And when you turn off the lights, they can do so many things with light. They can explore their bodies, they can trace letters. The same again with mirrors. All of these elements will extend all the learning, and it could be used with the loose parts, but that it can be used by themselves as well.
Often as adults in these experiences, we don't have the same level of imagination as children do. So it's really wonderful for us to then see the different ideas that they can come up with. Perhaps if your child has been building with loose parts and exploring maybe some numeracy concepts, if you turn off the lights and you shine a torch on their creations, perhaps it totally changes the way that they've been looking at it. Perhaps those creations turn into letters or houses or something completely different. So yes, think about different ways that you can transform those materials.
That comes back to the beginning when we said about we have the loose parts, we have the containers. How do we present them? The way that we present the materials will bring the learning into one direction or another. It's not always about us prompting. That is good to use the open-ended questions, but sometimes with the younger children, that sometimes they don't understand that better. Those questions is about what you are presenting them. So the way that we are presenting the materials will bring them into a next level of learning, we'll say.
And I think as well, you were saying about if you've had the same loose parts and the same materials in your household, these tools can help you to bring a new light to them, to reimagine them, to reinvent them. So if your child is seemingly a little bit bored of those loose parts, then you can look at them in a completely new light. Okay, so I think finally we just want to emphasize that learning is everywhere. It doesn't need to take place only at school, only at home, perhaps throughout your daily routines. If you're a very busy parent and you don't get to spend much time at home with your child, if you're picking them up from school and you're either driving home or you're on the bus or the MRT, there's so many different possibilities. I think for bus, MRT or car, it rains so much here in Singapore, and you might have heavy aircon happening. So the condensation on windows provides an amazing opportunity for you to explore not only literacy and numeracy, but storytelling, drawing, creating lots of different ideas.
It becomes the whiteboard. That, yes, happened for a while.
Then thinking about bath time and meal times, how can you encourage your child to think about those literacy and numeracy concepts? So maybe setting the table together, counting how many knives and forks you might need, how many plates you have. Do we need some extra? Are there some missing? So there's so many ways that you can very simply incorporate these kind of academic concepts into your daily life without having to have a 1 hour sit down period when you're at home.
An easy one as well, always when you are on the move, on the go, is look at shapes, colors. They are absolutely everywhere, and they actually help them to later on to identify better and abstract the different things that they see around. So when they later on wants to draw, for example, a house, they understand that a house is made by a rectangle and maybe a triangle on the top, and then the chimney could be like a square. So everything in life, like a car, a bus, everything that's around us, it comes back into like the simple shapes. So having all these conversations about, do you see any circles around us? Or look, these kind of conversations will help them as well to abstract what they see into more simple shapes or more simple colors.
I think as well, encouraging children to be inquisitive. So perhaps if you're thinking, I'd like to encourage those skills of curiosity and inquisitiveness in my child, then asking those questions, highlighting, what can we see over here? If we're walking through the city or through the parks, having conversations with your children, asking questions to highlight those things, to help them to think about it.
Sometimes as well is to slow down. I know we all have very busy lives, but sometimes when you're walking back home, instead of rushing home, you can just take a bit of like longer route, and then when you're walking and you see a beautiful leaves down there, stop. Oh, look at this leaf, look at the shapes, look at the lines that you see, look at the colors, what colors do you see? So then that helps them as well to slow down and focus and go deeper into everything that is around us.
It's like slowing down and putting rose-tinted glasses on, so seeing the world through the potential way that your child might see the world.
Because sometimes as adults, we see all these things all the time and we forget. But for children, most of the times, it's the first time that they've seen this. So they're always curious and they are always wondering. So it's using that curiosity to help them go deeper.
Yeah. So I think we can open up the floor now. Does anybody have any questions? I've seen a lot of messages coming through on the chat, but my eyesight is not wonderful. Okay. So what age group of toddlers are these materials suitable for?
All materials are suitable for all the children, but you need to have in mind it depends on the exact age of your child, and the development of that child. Like there's children with 18 months that they still put things in the mouth, so then you don't want to put very small materials, but you can bring lots of loose parts, such as, for example, you have big rings, wooden rings or metal rings. You can use bowls, you can use big lids, big materials that they cannot go inside the mouth completely, mainly, but still have that connection with the open-ended materials, and they can explore. For example, when my child was a baby, I will have a treasure bag, so I will just collect for a while. He was interested on sound, so then I will have lots of different things that are metallic, because then the way that he will interact, he will create different sounds. So such as a spoon, a bowl, a small metal bowl, but as well I will put like a very soft fabric inside, a silky fabric that can create this idea of like hide and seek, that if you put it on top of the metal would change the sound. Especially metal and wood will be the best ones for the younger ages, and big materials. But then as they grow, the materials can become smaller. We see children as capable, and they all have the possibility of use materials. So for example, my child is not 3 yet and he already used very small materials, but you need to scaffold that. You just don't present all these tiny small materials at once and expect him to know what to do with it. You sit down, you explain the dangers, you explain the possible ways that you can use and what you cannot do. Mainly, once they understand the basics, then you add more, and then they become independent on using it.
I think as well, children like the responsibility.
Definitely.
Of knowing and understanding that perhaps this is something I wouldn't usually be allowed to explore or play with, but now I'm learning how to use it in a responsible way. I know with glass and ceramics as well, often that's quite concerning to parents just in case they break. However, throughout my time at EtonHouse Claymore, we had glass jars and ceramic bowls in the classroom, and we just worked alongside the children to understand that this is something delicate. We need to handle this with care and understand the consequences. So if we're not careful, then it's going to break and there will be sharp pieces that could hurt us. So just, explaining that to them, I think helps support their knowledge and of how to use that material.
Definitely. And sometimes when answering to one of the questions about a 5-year-old not wanting to sit down, sometimes they don't need to sit down. It could be on the floor, it could be on the move, it could be a standing up. It doesn't actually need to be sitting down. Sometimes we forget that children learn as well through their physical body, and they need to have the option to move. So maybe in this case, maybe actually you want to go in the opposite way. You want to go to big materials. So there's a lot of like lifting and gross motor skills. So at the moment, for example, my child, he is into building. So now, and he's a very active and energetic child. So we have a sofa that is a modular sofa, so it can like come apart, we'll say. So he's using the different cushions of the sofa to build his houses in this sense, because then he's using all his strength, and that is giving him that like release of his needs of like heavy and use their whole body muscles, we'll say. Once he has created the big structure, then he goes into the more smaller materials to add the details into it.
I think as well, connecting to his interests. Boring is a very common word. So finding out what is he interested in, what is he intrigued by? Is there a specific, cartoon or Transformers or that kind of thing? So finding what that interest is and then trying to combine and connect. Often children like to create and retell stories. So then perhaps you're looking at, why don't we write this story down? Why don't we make a book all about the Transformers? You could take photos of the Transformers in different positions or, however his narrative is playing out, and then print them out and include them in the story later on.
Or as well, you can reinterpret those characters, like they like the cars, they like the princesses, anything. Then maybe you offer some loose parts. In this case, I will suggest like some medium and small loose parts where they can reinterpret those characters. They can redesign the car that they like, the transformer that they like, and all the possibilities. And then they love to tell you the story about behind of what they design. Later on, you can always bring a drawing into place. You can bring how many pieces of this type you use. Like you can connect it to numeracy and literacy in a very organic way. I think we have some more questions.
Yeah, so the next one is, how do I introduce loose parts to young babies aged 2 months onwards?
For such a young age, I will say simple things as like a mirror would be amazing, because they are getting to understand themselves in that sense. They don't move much. So I will start building the treasure box that I mentioned before, where you can bring elements of wood, elements of metal. At that age as well, they don't differentiate the colors. So actually colors is not an important thing in that moment. I will select things that are more like black and white or silver, like neutral colors, because they don't differentiate if it's red or if it's green. And then it's all about sensory.
Okay, the next question. How often should we rotate the materials to make sure they achieve the objectives, but not rushing them to change to a new objective?
I don't think there is a specific time, that you can use is just when you see that he's losing interest on that, then is when you rotate. Sometimes I rotate all of the toys, sometimes I rotate just some amount. So as I said before, using flexible furniture always helps, so you can have like a specific shelving or specific cubicles for different things, like, I don't know, like imagination, maybe more related to numeracy and literacy, more sensorial. It depends on your child, on what you want to offer at home. And then when you see that one of those is like losing interest, then you change it. As well, you can always combine, like sometimes I bring a lot of like loose parts within the cars. So he uses the loose parts to build houses for the cars, or he uses them as people that goes within the cars. Like you can combine them.
I think as well, before maybe adding extras or totally packing those materials away, often at school, what we do is we change the location. So we might take them outdoors, or you might line them up on the windowsill. And so just changing the location of where the materials are changes the perception, changes the possibilities. And if they're still really not interested after that, then you know, okay, it's time for a change.
And as well, the location within the house. Like sometimes these are provocations that you want to build maybe in the room where there's a different type of feeling, or you want to put them in the living room, or like as Jessica said, you want to put them on the windowsill, or maybe you want to put them really low with a mirror underneath, with a torch, those elements that we mentioned before.
My kids always dump any loose parts that I have lying around instead of engaging with it. They find it funny. How do I stop them from doing that and actually playing with it?
I think first of all, you need to encourage them to be part of the hunting. Like they need to participate on like collection of the materials, and then they will start getting more connected to this. And then maybe sometimes as well about role playing, like you sitting down with them to do an example of the possibilities that you can do with them, and then they always want to join.
We have another question here, which is, how can we make it more engaging? My almost 3-year-old loses interest after a while and wants to do something else quickly. And then somebody added on, how do we avoid them dumping everything together in the end, or is that fine to encourage? Do you want to answer the first bit?
At some point, it always happens.
I think it's about understanding and having a respect for the materials. So as Ainhoa mentioned, if the children have been part of that collection process and identifying the loose parts that they want to have in their house and have on offer and available to them, also cleaning and taking care of them and making sure they're presented in a nice way, that then once they've finished exploring and they've finished creating with them, then it's being encouraged to reset and to continue to respect the materials. We don't just leave them lying around everywhere. If they've come from this selection of containers that we've spent time organizing, then we need to make time to reorganize them so that when we come back to wanting to use them, they're ready for us.
I will reflect as well about the amount of materials that you are offering. So maybe then you want to reduce the amount and have like a deeper understanding of the ones that you already have. Once they have that and they're able to, and they know how to use it, then you can start adding into it. Another way is as well what Ms. Jessica was saying about the containers, having like the different containers. So maybe it's observing, maybe as well what they are interested in is more like role play, and what they're trying to do is more like the cooking thing. So they maybe reduce amount, explore with less amount of materials. What are the possibilities later you add to it?
And I think also asking questions. So, I can see you've gathered everything together here. What's happening? What
are you making?
What are you creating? And so talking to the children to find out about it. I think often to us, things can look like mess, whereas actually this is something that's been very well thought through and created and designed by the children. So just having those conversations and finding out more about what they're doing.
Oh, we have a lot.
It keeps jumping.
Oh, okay.
So is it okay for children to use loose parts to engage in dramatic play, or do they have to create?
there is no and one way of using them. It could be dramatic play completely. Like, it's up to the child. He is expressing himself using loose bars as a medium, but everything is okay.
Okay. Does anyone have any more questions? We did receive a list of questions prior to the webinar, so we could move on to answering some of those. But as everybody has been typing away, if you do have any more that you'd like to ask us directly. Okay, let's have a little read through. So how do we find time out of work? I think time around work was one question that was asked quite a lot.
But I think is kind of like what we mentioned, every moment is a moment for learning. Like, every single moment when you are waking up your child, when you're giving them breakfast, getting ready to go to school, you can start talking about the shapes of the clothes that they wear, in the colors, what we said on the way to school, whether you're driving or you're on the MRT. All of those moments have possibilities they are all possibilities for learning. It's just up to us to like bring that up and encourage that learning.
I think I'm just reading through the questions that came in, and I think we've covered most of them either through our sharing or through questions that have come up here. Is screen time useful for learning as well? I think this is tricky. This is a very personal opinion. I think it depends on how you're using the screen. So for me personally, lots of schools, not only within EtonHouse, lots of other schools use iPads for children to play games on, for literacy and numeracy and various other skills. I think for me, personally, as an educator, that's okay, but for a very, very short period of time. Rather, in my classroom, I would use it to help the children to research, so to find out information that we don't have in the books in our classroom or we don't have ready at our fingertips. So using it as a tool, yes, for research rather than playing games. But also as a parent, that's very different. And I think as well, being a very busy parent and having, maybe lots of travel time, it can be very useful to use the screen to keep your child.
I will say that sometimes it's okay. The screen is there, like we cannot hide it. It's around the children all the time. It's just the way that we use it and how we use it, right? So for me, the screen should be always social, like not by himself alone in a corner. It should be next to you, next to someone else. So there's conversation, there is a purpose behind. The time as well that we are offering the screen is an important thing. I always short it into the minimum, we'll say, like the minimum amount. And sometimes it helps to spark the curiosity for something else. So maybe in this case, I don't use games or any kind of I don't use that style of screening with my child. The only thing that he does sometimes is he watch on the weekends for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, like some cartoon episodes. But then we select very carefully what is he gonna watch. And then normally it has like pedagogical background to it, talks about real life moments that will help him to later go and exploring himself. So most of the times after watching like a chapter, he will go to his play area and he will reinterpret what happened on that chapter on his own way, with his toys, with the loose bars, with dramatic play, on lots of different ways.
I think as well it's age dependent.
Yes.
Your child is not even 3 yet. And so there are many different ways that children can be engaged, or, many different ways that they can connect with stories and with literacy and with numeracy. For older children, it can be slightly different. However, there will be another EtonHouse parent workshop, which will be on the 20th of March, which is all around screen time. So I think now what we need to do, thank you to our IT friends. So if you want to kind of snap the QR code, it will take you to the landing page and share more information about what will be shared in that session. I think for now, it's time for us to wrap up. But we hope this has been engaging. We really enjoyed preparing for this session and playing around with all of the various loose parts. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we hope that we gave you some ideas and possibilities to do at home, and that you find them useful. Maybe it make you reflect and rethink your spaces at home, and even to look at loose parts on a completely different way. So yeah, hopefully you are able to use them. Give us some feedback on how that goes.
And thank you for giving up your lunch break.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.